It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, hockey fans? This is The Big Show, brought to you by The Hockey News. I'm Michael Traikos. With me, as always, live from Edmonton, actually, is Ryan Kennedy. And once again, pleased to welcome back to the show, Drew Shore. How you doing, Drew?
I'm doing great. That was a fun game. It felt like it was like 3 weeks before the Stanley Cup finally got started. So it's nice to have it rolling. It was super entertaining.
It did feel like it's been a while. And you know what? Had, I guess, the Edmonton-Dallas series stretched on for another game, we'd be waiting another few days before things kicked off. But Ryan, you're live in Edmonton. You're there. I don't know if your ears have survived how loud it was in that arena last night. But let's kick things off with that 4-3 overtime win by the Oilers. We always say this, guys. The best players have to be your best players in the playoffs if you're going to have any level of success. And last night in game one, it was once again the superstars taken over. 2 goals by Leon Draisaitl, 2 huge assists by Connor McDavid, including the game-tying assist to Mattias Ekholm, as well as the overtime assist to Draisaitl. Ryan, this seems like a recipe for success if you're the Oilers.
It really does. And you know, I mean, that Ekholm goal in particular, where, you know, like Florida does not give up leads in the playoffs. I think this was the first time, I think I saw something post-game. They are now 31-1 when leading after 2 periods or whatever it was. That was the first setback. When McDavid gets the puck, you just get that feeling of inevitability sometimes. And the fact that he drew all the Panthers towards him and then dished it out to Ekholm. I mean, that's the kind of vision that McDavid has. I asked Brett Kulak about it after the game, and he was like, yeah, McDavid, he's got the quickest feet, the quickest hands. He never looks at the puck, and he knows where everybody is on the ice all the time. And that's why he's such a devastating playmaker. And, you know, Draisaitl after the game, you know, he gave a lot of credit to everybody else on the ice for that power play overtime winner, talking about the great plays made by Corey Perry. You know, the play before that, I think, was Nugent Hopkins, and obviously the dish from McDavid. But when you're Leon Draisaitl, you hit those shots so often, and that's why he's such an elite player. Like, he doesn't muff those, right? It's like it's in the back of the net, just like the goal that started the game, you know, a minute in. So, I mean, that's why they are 2 of the best players in the world.
It drew that the one, you know, the pass to Draisaitl was impressive, but for me, the pass to Ekholm on the game tying goal was equally, if not better. Just because it looked like McDavid was, you know, he goes wide, he looked like he was circling around the net, and then he dishes a puck in the middle that you think's going to the guy that's got 3 Panthers around him. Instead, it's the trailer, Mattias Ekholm, who, you know, this guy's supposed to be a stay-at-home defenseman and slides in and just buries just an incredible pass. You know, what's that like watching that as McDavid makes it look so easy?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's able to make those passes on his backhand skating at that speed, I think is what really separates him from the rest of the league. Like, there's a lot of players in the NHL who are good players who, I mean, aren't that comfortable making those type of passes on their backhand. And there's very few people who are. And that was an incredible play, and it was a huge goal for them. And you got to give Ekholm credit too. I mean, the pass was great, but he still was able to finish that through traffic, and it was pretty impressive.
Now, if you're the Panthers, you play a really good game. And as Ryan said, the stats show that when they have the lead going into the second and third periods, they are unstoppable. And, you know, once again, this was a game where we're talking about Sam Bennett and we're talking about an opposing goalie and a goalie interference penalty that didn't get called. You know, what was your thought, Drew, on that goalie interference challenge that didn't go Edmonton's way? And right now, for scoring at home, it's 0-4 on challenges in the playoffs.
I'm not a rules expert, but when I watched that at first glance, I thought that was going to get overturned. I mean, I don't know. You guys probably even know what the textbook rules are better than I am. But
no one knows the rules, Drew. That's the problem.
But it didn't look like to me, there was enough evidence that he was shoved into the goaltender by the defensive player. And he clearly interfered with Stuart Skinner's ability to make a play on that puck. So I was surprised. And the review seemed to happen really quick. I mean, we always talk about how some of those reviews can take, I mean, I think recall the Alex Petrovic review in the Dallas series took literally 10 minutes to watch. So I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah. Is there a player that's better at accidentally falling on goalies than Sam Bennett? Like it's amazing. He's kind of worked this into his kind of, repertoire right now.
Well, he plays hard.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, he plays hard and goes the net. I mean, he had another great game. I don't know how many goals. Is that I think is that his 12th goal of the playoffs?
It is. Leads everybody.
With every goal, he just add another $1 million to his next contract.
Right.
I know. He's going to be getting paid, and it just seems like his price tag is going up every day.
Yeah. It is funny that people are like, oh, he's going to get overpaid. And it's like, well, yeah, but then you get Sam Bennett. It's like you're trying to win a cup. He's clearly, a driver in the postseason. Like he clearly elevates his game. So it's like if he's the missing piece of the puzzle, I'd say overpay him, like.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, the top free agent every year, free agency, I mean, normally gets more money than they're probably worth. But I think that there's certain guys that get overpaid just on a statistics alone standpoint. And I mean, he's proven he's a guy who's going to help you win a Stanley Cup. So I think that if I'm a general manager, I don't mind overpaying him.
Yeah, if he's going to be the guy that say if he goes to Toronto and he convinces Matthews to play with more of a snarl, the same way that Tkachuk kind of drags guys into a fight, I don't think he'd have any problems because I guess we throw out the word intangibles, intangibles mean so much, but I think in this case, it kind of does. Let's kind of talk about physicality here because I think it was 51 hits aside for both teams. And I think going into this playoffs, everyone thought it was, okay, the Panthers are the more, they're the bigger, more physical team. How are the Oilers going to counteract that? Am I wrong, Ryan? Like, are the Oilers a nastier team than maybe we gave them credit for?
I would say that giving the advantage to Florida in that category may have been a bit premature. Obviously, they have the sort of bigger name physical guys like Bennett and Tkachuk and whatnot. We did think going into this series, the fact that Edmonton had a healthy Evander Kane is going to be a big difference from last year's matchup. The fact that they brought in Trent Frederick will help in that regard. Now Matthias Ekholm is healthy and he's a big body. What I kind of observed in that first game is that, Edmonton is the faster team. And even with, Zach Hyman out, because he's so great at getting in on the forecheck. But with them being the faster team, they can close on the Panthers perhaps a little unexpectedly sometimes, and they are finishing their checks when they do so. So that to me was a pretty interesting wrinkle in game one.
Yeah, Kapanen's speed. Like you think McDavid's fast, and you see Kapanen, and you're like, okay, I would love to see these guys in a foot race.
Right.
Yeah, Kapanen had a great game, but Ryan, I think your point on we're just seeing how much the Edmonton Oilers missed Evander Kane last year. I mean, I know he played, but I mean, he didn't look like, he was probably playing at 30 or 40%. I think he had 9 hits in the game last night. Talk about a guy who goes the pain. I think he had like the primary screen or direct screen on 2 of the Edmonton goals.
That hit on Ekblad alone was just massive in the first period.
Yeah, and for people who, it just changes the dynamic on the ice so much when going back for a puck as a defenseman, there's a guy like Evander Kane coming in. And I think that they don't have a ton of those guys in their lineup, but those Florida defensemen are going to definitely feel by the end of the series that Evander Kane's playing in the series.
The funny thing, too, about Evander Kane is like, you don't want to fight him because he wants to fight. Like, you don't want to fight a guy who's excited to do it, who is named after one of the best boxers of all time. So it's like if you get into a scrum, you can only do so much because if you actually drop the gloves, it's like, no, he's excited about this. And it's like, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, and he doesn't play on the power play a lot and stuff there, but I mean, people forget that he's getting a little bit older, but at the prime of his career, I mean, he was a top 5-10 power forward in the league. I mean, he'd score 30 goals, he'd lead the league in hits, and also would have 5 or 10 fighting majors against very tough customers.
Yeah, it just kind of underscores Edmonton's depth. And I don't think we used to talk about their depth, in previous years. It was always like, oh, they're so imbalanced because they're paying their top dogs so much money that they don't have depth. But now you've got like Jeff Skinner on the sidelines. You've got a Zach Hyman who's not in the playoffs now. And you're not really missing these guys because you have Connor Brown, you've got Kasperi Kapanen, you got Trent Frederick, you've got just a lot of guys. Like every night, it seems like there's going to be a new player that steps up for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that's the big thing with this squad is, even like, and we did see this last year, like Matthias Janmark was so crucial. Adam Henrique was so crucial. Connor Brown was so crucial. The way they played shorthanded in particular. So when you get those additions, when you're healthier, Darnell Nurse is another guy who gutted through the Stanley Cup final last year. Now he's in better condition.
Yeah, I think he's a guy too that, I mean, he makes a lot of money. He's definitely overpaid for what he brings on a daily basis, but you got to give him credit. He's been very solid throughout this whole playoffs. And I mean, he takes so much heat in the media, but he's a guy who's just been very reliable, hasn't really made too many mistakes throughout the whole playoffs, and is playing very solid.
All right. So if you're Paul Maurice and the Florida Panthers, you're down 0-1. This is a familiar spot because you're down 0-2 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. What's the level of concern, and what do you do to ensure that 97 and what's Draisaitl's number 29 are held off the score sheet, or how do you limit their ability to hurt you in game 2?
I think Florida, I mean, we've talked about this a lot on the pod. Like, I don't think you can ever completely eliminate those guys, but I think that the game had so many ebbs and flows. Like, obviously Florida got off to a great start, but then they started turning a couple pucks over towards that second period and definitely did some things that were very uncharacteristic of how they've played in the past. So I think if you're him, you think like as a team on a visiting team, you go into that series thinking we have to steal one in Edmonton. You know what I mean? And it doesn't really matter if it's the first game or the second game, but we still won. We basically have home ice for the rest of the series. So I think that that's the mindset that they take in, and Paul Maurice, I think, is the best coach in the NHL, so I'm sure he'll be able to make a couple adjustments, and I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, Edmonton outshot them 14-2 in the second period. Sort of like with the benefit of hindsight, the Panthers had to win more shifts in that period. They had to break things up so that the Oilers weren't so dominant. And I think they'll watch the video and they'll learn from that.
And one guy I'm looking forward to seeing how he bounces back is Sergei Bobrovsky. Obviously, it's been it was a slow start to the playoffs for Bob, and then by game 3, I think of the second round, we started to see like the Vezina Trophy Bobrovsky kind of show up. Him allowing 4 goals, it's still kind of uncharacteristic. That being said, could have easily been 9-3 for the Oilers just because McDavid hit like a number of posts. Kapanen on that breakaway hit a post. He's going to probably have to steal at least a game in this series if the Florida Panthers are going to have to have some success, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also I was really impressed with Stuart Skinner's post-game interview. I mean, I think a lot of people, the way that game started, were kind of thinking like, oh no, here we go again. And not to say that they were terrible goals, but I mean, I don't know how many goals they had. I think I looked up and there was 8 shots, I think, when it was 2 or 3-1. So I think that the way he was able to bounce back for me was pretty impressive and definitely made some big saves down the stretch.
I was impressed. Yeah, I was impressed with Skinner post game. I was at the tail end of his scrum, and he just seemed so chill. Like they were asking him, like, "Oh, what do you do when you're not getting a lot of action?" Like in that second period when Edmonton dominated, and he was like, "Yeah, you just kind of like you're waiting to." You want to make saves, but you just kind of do your breathing and you're waiting for it. And it's like, oh, this guy's got a good demeanor right now.
Has their opinion changed on Stuart Skinner, Ryan? Like, this is the guy now in back-to-back finals. Doesn't get any respect when you're talking about like some of the better goalies in the league. It's almost like Edmonton got to the final in spite of Stuart Skinner. And now it's like you're looking at how he played against Dallas. And, I know he's been rocky and up and down, but what are your thoughts on Skinner now?
It's so weird because he goes on those runs where he's unstoppable, but then he has those periods where they literally have to replace him with the backup. So you're kind of waiting to see like when things are going to shift, but they might not, right? Like if he plays excellent hockey for another week and a half, they win the Stanley Cup. So I don't know, a great mystery, and I don't know how Oilers fans feel. It might be, might be hard for them, but to me, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think too. Like, it's funny. The guy I was sitting with watching the game was like saying pregame, he's like, he's either going to have a shutout or let in 6 goals and get pulled. And that's kind of been the narrative for most of the playoffs in his whole career. So I actually think mentally for a confidence boost for him, knowing he probably didn't have his A-plus game last night, but he hasn't shown that ability, at least to me, where, yes, he's been dominant in 1 games where the other team has either not scored or scored 1 goal. But for him to be able to kind of grind out a win after letting in a couple goals that maybe he would have liked to have a few back, I think it's going to be big for him long term.
Awesome. All right. Well, game 2 is on Friday. Ryan Kennedy will be there live, as well as Avery Lewis McDougall. Follow their coverage at thn.com. Let's look around the league for those non-playoff teams, or non-final teams, I should say. Sean Monahan was just named the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy for the player who exhibits perseverance, winning this trophy. Johnny Gaudreau's wife presented it to him. Obviously, it's been a tough year for the Columbus Blue Jackets, as well as Sean Monahan, who signed in Columbus to play with Johnny. He had a really good year in spite of just how emotionally difficult it must have been. 19 goals, 57 points in 54 games. Had he played a full season, that's a heck of a year. What did we make of Sean Monahan winning this award, guys?
I mean, I thought it was a no-brainer. I actually played with Johnny and Sean kind of when they were coming up together in Calgary. And it was cool just to see. I mean, they were best friends off the ice together every day, and then obviously had a remarkable chemistry on the ice and kind of had the whole city of Calgary rallying behind the two of them. So I kind of got to see firsthand how close they were. And I've been super impressed with just Sean from off the ice. Obviously, he went through a tragedy that no one should have to go through, and the way he's been able to kind of handle it, be there for Johnny's family and everything else has been super impressive from afar for me.
Yeah, Monahan was first on my ballot, and I mean, I loved the presentation that they did. I thought that was really cool. But he really fit the Masterton to a T. Like, you talk about perseverance, and not only everything he had to go through off the ice, but as you mentioned, Mike, he was terrific on the ice. And I do remember early in the season talking to Adam Fantilli and, Columbus coach Dean Evison just about the impact that Sean Monahan was having on Columbus's younger forwards as a role model. And, they really, like, guys like Fantilli really learned a lot from Monahan. So, he was contributing in so many different ways under really tough circumstances. And I just think it was really well deserved.
Yeah, no, it could have been a storybook ending had Columbus made the playoffs, but even the fact that they just barely missed out, what a year it was for them again. Like, no one really expected them to even be that close. So, heck of an honor for Monahan under such difficult circumstances. Ryan, Bill Daly and Commissioner Gary Bettman both spoke, as they always do. Right before game 1 on Wednesday. One of the things that stood out to me was the idea that, tax-free states, they the argument is that they have a competitive imbalance. And there was talk about whether the CBA is going to be addressing that in the future. What were your thoughts on how both Bettman and Daly handled that? And, essentially they poured cold water on the idea that, that there is this advantage. Agree, disagree? How'd you feel?
I agree with them. It was kind of funny because when the question was asked, Bettman was like, you know what? I'm going to let Bill answer this because I'm sick of talking about it.
He seemed upset to be asked about it.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody who actually had some really good thoughts. So Bettman and Daly spoke, and then Marty Walsh and Ron Hainsey from the Players Association did their own little scrum afterwards, sort of off to the side. And Ron Hainsey was really good about this. he was saying, he was like, look, from 2008 to 2020, who was running the league? Boston, Pittsburgh, LA, a little bit of Detroit, Chicago. None of those teams are in tax-free states. You look at like Chara, Bergeron, Marchand at the time, like maybe they could have made more money playing elsewhere, but they didn't. You can say the same thing for Taves and Kane. You can say the same thing for Kopitar and Doughty. He was like, what, were Tampa and Florida never supposed to be good? Like, it's about the organizations. And I do think that's a big thing here that, yeah, like it's Bill Zito, it's Julien Brisebois. Like, these are the guys that are making players want to come to these organizations because we've talked about this before. Like, that wasn't always the case. And, Nashville didn't make the playoffs. Seattle didn't make the playoffs. Seattle hasn't been a big free agent destination yet. So it just kind of feels like an excuse for teams that came up short.
I agree. And I think that, like, certainly it's an advantage that when players are deciding where they want to sign might lean them to going there. But there's also a million other things that are factors, like the city in general. Like LA has one of the highest taxes probably in the world now, but like people like living in sunshine and being in LA. It's like, I don't think you can start changing too much with that because there's a lot of teams that are at disadvantages for that too. I mean, Winnipeg's minus 60 degrees the entire winter, and a lot of players don't want to deal with that. So you're going to give them extra salary cap money too. But I do agree with your point. I think that what people are kind of using that and taking away from is just how good of a job the people running those organizations have done. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, now that, like, if you look back to all the trades Bill Zito's made and the coach he's brought in, and now they're one of the best teams in the league. So of course people want to sign and play there for that reason. And yes, the taxes help, but I think too much is being made and taken away from the credit that's deserved for the people running those organizations.
No, well put. I don't think it's an issue that's going to go away, sadly, especially with free agency around the corner. We're going to see Sam Bennett and Marchand both sign, and Ekblad all signed with Florida, and we're going to go, all right, here we go again. So this is probably one that the NHL's, I know Bettman's tired of hearing about it, but sorry, you're going to be hearing about this again and again. A couple of new coaching hires. Marco Sturm joining Boston as the new head coach, as well Dan Muse joining the Pittsburgh Penguins as the head coach. Let's start with Dan Muse. He comes in as an associate coach from the Nashville Predators, having spent also time as an associate with the New York Rangers. The fact that they went with a guy like Dan Muse over maybe a recycled option who's been a head coach, who's used to winning. Ryan, does this change your perception, or does this lead you to believe that maybe the Penguins are thinking, bottom five finish versus, hey, we're going to make that jump to be a playoff team this year?
I like the hire a lot. It will be interesting because, Dan Muse, his best work has come at the junior level. Like, he won a Clark Cup in the USHL with the Chicago Steel. He coached the NTDP for several years. At the same time as Adam Nightingale was the other coach at the NTDP, because they have the U17s and the U18s, and they would flip back and forth. So, and ironically, one of the players that Dan Muse coached was Rutger McGroarty. So, he knows how to coach young talent. He knows how to coach a lot of talent, I would say, which is one of the challenges with the NTDP is you have, 23 kids who are always the best. And all of a sudden, some of them have to be fourth liners. Some of them have to be third pairing defensemen. It's not an easy job. Some coaches are really good at it. Some coaches aren't. So with Dan Muse, I think he's already used to dealing with personalities, albeit on, a junior level. He's been a video coach before for the World Junior team. Like, he's won in different levels. And I think that'll be very interesting for the Penguins to bring in a new guy, a young guy. But if we're going to be realistic, like, that's what the Penguins need. They need to get younger. They need to get some more elite talent that's on the way up and not just rely on Sidney Crosby as they are right now.
Yeah, if you're hiring a coach who's, more adept at developing young talent, I agree that's the way to go. But it doesn't strike me as a team that's saying, all right, we want to also be a playoff team this year. I don't think you can do both.
No, I don't think you can do both either. And I mean, they're going to have a very difficult offseason for that reason. I mean, we don't need to talk about the aging superstars that are some of the best players in the game, but those guys are uber competitive guys who want to win. So I don't think they're going to be super on board with like hey, we want to finish top 5 and get a pick. Like, I don't see that working well with those guys. So then it's like the question of, okay, like if we are going to go full rebuild, then we got to start moving these guys. And I mean, they have a lot of high-end assets that teams would pay a lot for, but a lot of those guys are on full no-move contracts. Don't know if they want to be full-time Pittsburgh Penguins or play somewhere else and have a chance to win. But I think like in terms of teams, like we've talked about, those teams that are just stuck in the middle, who aren't really rebuilding and don't really have a chance to win are in a difficult spot.
Yeah, and then let's talk about Sturm here because, obviously he comes to Boston way back when in that Joe Thornton blockbuster trade from San Jose. More recently, obviously, he's been associate coach for the LA Kings and as well as the head coach for their AHL affiliate, the Ontario Reign. German coach, believe the first German head coach in the NHL now. So what do we make of, Sturm replacing interim coach Joe Sacco?
I like this move too. Marco Sturm has been on the radar for years now. He coached Germany at the Olympics, got them a silver medal, and that was not a team that had a ton of talent. Like, this was not a Leon Draisaitl team Germany, right? This was when they did not have NHL players there. So he can clearly coach structure. He's clearly put in his dues, coaching for the Reign, being behind an NHL bench as an assistant coach, associate coach, whatever. So again, I like this where it's like, you're not just going to the recycling bin. You're choosing a guy that is seen as kind of an up and comer. And I think it's worth the gamble in Boston where, they've lost some significant players just at the trade deadline alone. And I don't expect the Bruins to be, what they have been in past years, but that might be okay, right? Like, you have to turn over a new chapter, and let's see what that chapter looks like.
Do you guys think Marchand ends up back there?
No. I think he's going to Toronto, Drew. He said he's open to playing for a Canadian team.
That would make a good storyline, that's for sure.
He replaced his Marner spot on Matthews' line, 100%.
Oh.
Like you talked about, I think somehow Bill Zito will find a way to keep like a lot of these guys down there, and then we'll have to hear about how they kept him there because there's no state tax all offseason.
Right.
Hey, Drew, the NHL Combine's coming up this week. Ryan and I think you've gone through the Combine before just as a reporter. Ryan, I know I have. I was going. I don't know if you remember the name Simone Dupree.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Defenseman. He was there.
He was in my draft. Yeah.
He was in your draft. Okay, so listen, I'm not going to pump my tires, but I did so well at the Combine next to Dupree that his agent at the time, or actually his personal trainer, was saying, "You're getting beat by a goddamn reporter." So let me ask you, like, what was your best event at the Combine and worst event at the Combine? Because Sam Bennett, I think, famously did 0 chin-ups, and it obviously isn't hurting him. But, what was the one thing that you smoked on and one that kind of smoked you?
The VO2, I've always been a very good endurance athlete. So the VO2 bike was very good for me. And my quick bursts and explosiveness has never been great. So like the long jump or the broad jump, I think was by far the worst event that I did there. But I remember that, like, I remember more of the off ice interviews because the testing was like an hour or something, went by really quick, was like pretty generic, but it was very interesting as a young kid to just see how different teams treated all of those meetings, just in a sense from some were super serious, some were very hockey focused, some didn't ask any hockey questions. So it was interesting to see just how different teams approach that process throughout the draft.
Oh, here's the question. Because I remember back in the day, the Islanders used to give everybody like a phone book of a questionnaire. Did you do that one?
Yes, I did do that one. I remember, I think it was Lou Lamoriello might have been running New Jersey still, because I remember they were one of the teams that had like an additional treadmill test that you had to go to some like hospital. I just remember, like, I'm pretty sure on that. So I remember that because it was like on top of all the other testing, like a couple of days before or after, I was at like some hospital or something running on a treadmill, which wasn't great. But no, yeah, it was cool. And then I remember too, like, I played on that national development program team that we ended up winning, which was cool, but had a lot of guys with we had guys getting kicked out and stuff. And there was a ton of drama around the team that we played on. So I remember that was pretty question heavy, focused on that as well.
Interesting. I remember Dale Talon always had the same question he asked guys, boxers or briefs, to kind of throw them off at the beginning. Did you get that question? Or
yeah, I remember that one. There was another one. I remember too, on like a couple teams, like asked like if you wanted a beer or something, like during the interview, and like wanted to see how you handled that. And I remember like that was kind of a weird spot, especially as a younger kid. But yeah, it was overall, it was stressful at the time, but looking back, it was a good experience.
no, yeah, for sure. It's, I loved covering it. It always seemed like you're at like almost like a meat market, because you had all the trainers they're all eyeing you. And then you had the guy on the VO2 Max, like, who was running the event, just shouting in your ear the whole time.
Yeah.
And then you had the puke buckets and just, nasty stuff. All right. Playoff Frenzy. Oh, sorry, not Playoff Frenzy. The Big Show is presented by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro level composite stick without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That is STIX.com. Head over and gear up. And with that, we head into our final segment. This show's going so fast. This is rapid fire. So you guys know the drill. 5 questions. Let's get the clock started, even though there's no clock. Yes or no? Do we expect the Calgary Flames to improve or get worse next season? Drew, you're up first.
No, they stink.
They tied the Blues with the same amount of points.
I know, but no, I'm not hopping on this bandwagon.
I'm with you on that one. I think a lot of it was Dustin Wolf, and I believe that there could be a sophomore slump there as NHL shooters learn his tendencies.
Yeah, I had one final comment. I don't know if Calgary be worse, but the teams around them, I think, are going to be better. I think we're going to see a better version of the Canucks, a better version of the Predators, and even a better version of the Utah Mammoth. So I think that's going to hurt the Calgary Flames as well. Question 2. If Edmonton wins the final, Ryan, who does Connor McDavid pass the cup to first?
I think it's got to be Leon Draisaitl, right? I mean, they're attached at the hip in terms of like their reputations at this point. And I know sometimes it'll go to somebody who like hasn't won it before, that has been in the league a long time, like a Matthias Ekholm, for example. But it just feels like it's got to be Draisaitl.
Yeah, I think it would go probably Draisaitl, then Perry.
Yeah, that's the guy I was thinking, is Corey Perry, because I know he's won a cup, obviously, but it's been so long, and he's been in the lucky loser every single year, it seems like. So yeah. Question 3, another Edmonton related one. Will Jeff Skinner, who got into the conference final for one game, will he see any action in the Stanley Cup final?
Barring like injuries, I don't see it. I don't think he's a fit for this series, to be honest.
Why so?
The way he plays, like, he's not going to be smashing guys into the boards. Like, they don't need more, offense in that regard. Like, it just doesn't seem like he would help the cause against Florida in particular.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, unless Florida wins 2 or 3 in a row here, or a couple guys get severely injured, I don't think we see him.
You don't have to play in the final to get your name on the cup, right? It just you have to play in the playoffs. Is that correct?
No, I believe that's incorrect. I think you have to play more than half the regular season games, or play one game in the final. But there's also a weird thing where teams can like petition if they really want to go out of their way to put your name on. I believe, I'm not sure on that, but I think the generic rule is 40 regular season games or one game during the Stanley Cup final.
All right, we'll have to double check on that, but yeah, so he's already played in the playoffs, and I believe he'll get in there. All right, question 4. Brock Nelson, at the age of 33, just signed a 3-year extension to remain in Colorado. The cap hit is $7.5 million. Good move or overpay, Drew?
I think for the term, it's a good move. You know what I mean? Like a 7.5 to me is a little bit high, but I'm sure he's a guy who wanted at this point in his career and his age as much term as he can get. So I think it's a fine contract for the Avalanche, considering it's only 3 years at that number.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think it's one of those contracts that's going to be better next year versus in year 3, but it's not going to be horrible at that point, and the cap is going up. And Colorado is a win now team.
Yeah, if you get 7.5 for 3, what does John Tavares get?
Depends how big of a hometown discount he wants to take.
Yeah.
Is there are there taxes in Toronto? All right, last question, guys. Pink Pony Club by Chapel Roan has been the Oilers' post-game celebration song. Pass or fail on that? And bonus question, what is your favorite post-celebration song from your playing days, Drew or Ryan, that you just remember another team playing? So, Drew, we'll start with you.
I think it's a fine song. I think you got to do with whatever works. I will say, I remember in Russia, they do those game bonuses, like which they can't do in the NHL, where like the owner comes in before the game and regardless of your salary, they give you like every guy on the team gets X amount of money. So I've never seen a happier locker room than you do in Russia when it's like a double or triple bonus game and they play these like Russian tunes that I couldn't even understand, but were like club bangers. And after collecting a big win over there, I remember thinking that was a pretty good feeling.
Nice. I'm going to go pass on this one because I agree with Drew. It's like whatever works for the team. I've had that song stuck in my head for days now because I am in Edmonton. I will also, quick tangent, lyrically, that is one of the most poignant pop culture, like pop music songs. If you listen to it, I put it up there with "It Was a Good Day" by Ice Cube and "Rainy Days and Mondays" by the Carpenters as songs that really hit it home lyrically. As for your bonus question, the best celebration song I've ever seen is the Islanders. They had beaten the Leafs it was just a regular season game years ago. And their celebration song was "I'm on a Boat" by Lonely Island, like from Saturday Night Live. And Rick DiPietro knew every word.
Nice. You know what? I like Pink Pony Club just because it's so catchy and it's so cheesy, I guess. My favorite, during that Blues run in 2019, I heard Gloria by Laura Branigan so many times. Just a great 80s tune. And, it's always like a weird song, whether it's like the Leafs blasting Miley Cyrus's "We Can't Stop" for like a couple years, or what are the Capitals playing, like "Bands of Make Her Dance" by Juicy J, which is just a great one too. But love it. All right, guys, this was the big show. Like I said, game 2 is on Friday. Make sure you check out Playoff Frenzy live post game with our panel. I believe we'll have Avery again live at the rink, and catch the big show next week. Hopefully we'll have Drew on again. But for Drew Shore and Ryan Kennedy, I'm Michael Traikos. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.